guys. Welcome to this first episode of the P99 podcast. So, here with me is Jay Sharma. So, Jay has been a seasonal tech professional in our industry, and he has been a mentor and a coach to many in our industry. And he works like a guiding light for people who are stuck in our industry and are looking for a helping hand. So, Jay has worked in multiple companies like Amazon, Indeed, where he is currently working, and then he has worked on Microsoft. He has worked in Bloomberg. He has worked in the travel agent companies like Agoda, and he has explored a lot of avenues. And today we will be exploring his journey in tech, and we will have lots of questions on how to get hired and how to go to his position and how to become a better leader. So, Jay, thank you for joining this podcast
Thank you,
as the
Joel.
first
Happy to
guest.
be here.
And we will dive into your journey now. So, the stage is all yours.
Sure. Thank you. I couldn't have justice as good as you did to my introduction, but I'll take a moment to tell the audience about myself. I'm Jay Sharma. I'm an immigrant to United States. Came here many moons ago. Did my undergrad in computer science back home in India. Started my career as a software engineer, like many of you. Grew up the ranks, became an engineering manager, but always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I took the plunge, founded a company along with a friend of mine. The product was called as ProofHub, which was an online project management and collaboration portal. Um, I feel we were a little ahead of ourselves when we did that, but a lot of learnings came along the way. After spending about 4 years in there, I was able to make an exit out of the company, sold the company, came back to corporate to be able to better balance my family life and my work life. Also repivoted my career from software engineering into product management. Went to PayPal, helping them build some risk and fraud management softwares. From there, I came to Microsoft, spent 4 years in Microsoft, doing a bunch of different things around Bing, the search engine, and HoloLens, the holographic computer. Did that for about 4 years. Went to Agoda, moved to Thailand, spent 3 years in beautiful Thailand. Right before pandemic, we came back to the United States, came to Amazon. That's where I met Yudhravam. Spent about 2.5-ish years in Amazon, and now I'm at Indeed working on the recommendation platforms. Yeah, so that's about my journey.
Yeah. So, if you want to look back at your career, would you have changed anything about your career? Anything that you would?
I, if I were to look back, I probably wouldn't change the steps. I probably would change the time when I took the steps, right? For example, I think I waited too long to get into entrepreneurship. I spent almost a decade as an employee before I even decided of doing a startup.
Right.
I wish I would have done it sooner. A lot of learnings could have come much sooner. So I think that's the only aspect I would change. Other than that, I think I've always optimized my career for learning and impact. Those are the two dimensions that I always care about.
Right. If you were to given an option like you have to go to entrepreneurship now, or you have to stay in the corporate world, what would you choose for yourself now?
Um, I would love to go back to entrepreneurship. And that's probably my forte in next few years. At
Oh,
this point in time, my family situation is such that I need to balance a lot of needs. Most importantly, the financial commitments. As the you know, my daughter is starting college this year, which is a big financial commitment.
yeah,
So yeah, once the kids are off and we are empty nesters, I think entrepreneurship is my forte.
yeah. I think it has its own challenges, and if you love to take risks and you enjoy those challenges, then I think you should definitely try that. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I remember, as you mentioned, our time at Amazon, I used to love our one-on-ones whenever they used to have, and I used to look forward to your one-on-ones. So I always look forward to you as a leader at Amazon. So I want to know that you have been through multiple ranks, and currently you are heading the recommendations engine at Indeed. So how does a person land a position like you at a company? Like you were the CTO at Amazon and you are at a higher rank at Indeed. So how do you get to that position? What are the steps you do, and what's the process that it goes into getting hired there?
I think I'll go back to one of my early days, when I came to Bloomberg. I was probably similar experience as you are, not too old in the industry. My manager at that time told me, Jay, your job is to make my life easier. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? His name was Peter. I would not give the last name for privacy sakes, but like, Peter, what are you talking about? Like, this doesn't make sense. He's like, go think about it. So when I thought about it, essentially the what he was asking me to do is think outside of my comfort zone, do things value based, not task oriented. Don't take a task from your superiors or your managers and execute the task. Think, what should we do? Add value to the business, add value to your team, add value to yourself. I think the more value added stuff you do, the better you will become.
Right.
So that has been mantra for me ever since. I often like to delegate the executional stuff to give empower my teams, and I always focus on what is the problem to solve, not the solution. Right? That's how I am scaling. I'm not saying this will work for everybody, but that's something that has worked for me.
I think that's a valuable advice. And what's the process involved? So, if I have to explain, as an SD, if you're getting hired, you give some coding interviews, and then there's a behavioral interview. There might be a design level where you show off your design skills. But I believe the process at your level would be quite different than an SD or as a product manager. So what's the process of interviews that goes through at your level?
I think interviews are very similar. Again, there is no coding interview at these levels because people are not coding day in, day out.
Right,
And the senior positions are not required to do coding day to day basis, right? Their job
right,
is to essentially solve problems, right?
right,
So interviews are mostly around what kind of problems have you solved, why those were the right problems, what sort of impact these problems resulted in. So think about the Amazon's behavioral interviews or leadership principles. Like, they are perfect examples. Now the magnitude of the problem will change from an SD1 at Amazon to a L8 at Amazon.
right,
But at the end of the day, L8 isn't building something different than you are building,
right,
right? You are the ones who's building stuff that L8 is trying to build. So at the end of the day, the solutions are same. The point of view from where you look at these things changes slightly, and the impact that you have, like the decision making responsibilities you have, are very different.
right. And you mentioned that you have to show to them that you make your manager's life easy. So if someone like your manager might be a part of the hiring process. So how do you show to him during your interview process that I am the right guy to be hired and I will make your life easy by getting hired?
Yeah. Again, I think it is often misunderstood when we say, make managers' life easy. We are not talking about, you trying to just please your manager. That's
Correct.
not the intent. The intent essentially is, okay, the other way to say this is, how can you make others better? The only way we humans scale is by making others better. When you make 5 people better, now you have impacted 5 lives. If those 5 actually go, help improve 5 of their own, you have impacted 30 lives now,
Right.
right? 5 of your directs and then 25 beyond. And this thing can continue to grow, right? So the way to demonstrate this is how you have taken ownership of problems, how you have helped identify the right solutions, how you have helped kind of prioritize the right things, deprioritize the stuff that was not important. I think those are some of the ways that you can demonstrate that you have added value. I don't think you will ever in an interview go and say, "Oh, I made my manager's life easy."
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we are on the topic of hiring, I know at Amazon you tried to build a team from scratch. So, if I have to say, the Canada technology team did not used to exist earlier, and you
Sure.
joined the team and you scaled the team. You hired a lot of individuals, and I follow you a lot on online, so I know that you continued that trait on in your next company, Indeed, and you're also hiring members there, right? So I think as you have gone through lots of interviews in your journey, you have given a lot of interviews, you have taken a lot of interviews. What are some of the most important traits that you feel are necessary while going for an interview, or some natural things that you might possess which are very helpful? What do you see from your view that is important in an interview?
I think in an interview, first of all, depending on what role you are interviewing for, there are definitely the hard skills or the tech skills, what is relevant to that job, right? If you're a software engineer, you should understand programming, at least one language really, really good. Understand data structures, understand system design. So that's the obvious part, right? The other part that is super important is how self-aware you are. Like, are you vocally self-critical? Do you realize when you are wrong, and do you, take responsibility of the thing when you make a mistake? Second thing is, are you open to take feedback? Can you take others' ideas and help improve your own, or give feedback and help other make others' ideas better? This showcases that you are a team player and you are not somebody who lives in this world of foolhardy where I know everything and everybody else is a fool around me. You don't live in that fallacy, so that's important aspect. uh, the third thing is essentially how concisely can you articulate your thoughts, right? And can you distill information at the required level of depth for your audience? Like, when you're talking to a peer of yours, the level of depth is different versus when you're talking to your manager versus you're talking to your director, to VP, to CEO of the company,
Right.
right? And the last thing I would say is how, like, what level of curiosity do you have? Are you, when you see something new, do you lean in and say, I want to learn? Or do you like, oh my God, what is this? I don't know. I don't know this, so I'm going to stay away. And so I think those are the few things which you can use to your advantage. And if not done right, could also become a disadvantage for you.
Yeah. Technical skills, but he is a team player. Candidate B is brilliant in tech. He knows what he does in coding, but he lacks communication or soft skills with the team. But he's a team player. So there are some traits like first of all is the coding skill. Next is the soft skills that you possess, the communication. Next is being a team player. Then another thing can be some social skills, like you have to be a social person in your team to thrive, to get a promotion or something like that. And maybe something like an emotional intelligence. So, what are the top traits if you would have to rank for a SDE?
Um, it's a challenging question. But no matter what I say, it's going to be a wrong answer. But I'll give my point of view. Uh, the way I see it is, tech skills definitely will rank the highest because that's your core day-to-day job.
Right.
If you cannot execute your tasks, you might be very good at everything else, but you cannot deliver value. You cannot deliver on the main thing you're hired for, right? So I would rank tech skills at the top. I would say being a team player is next best, because like like any sport, like you follow cricket, you follow soccer, like you can't win a game if you're just a group of individuals.
Right.
You have to be a well-oiled machine, a high-performing team to be able to win a game,
Right.
right? So that's there. Then I will rank emotional intelligence. And I think this is very underrated and a very important skill. And the reason I say that is once you start mastering this and once you can not only control your own feelings, if you can try to see how or try to feel how others are feeling, that can totally be a game changer for you in terms of how you react to the situations. Like one example I give you is a lot of the times when somebody comes and talks to you about their problem, a lot of us have this instinct to jump in, try to solve their problem. Don't do that, right? If they're coming to you with a problem, doesn't mean they cannot solve the problem. They are just going through emotions. They might just need a ear to, just vent out to. They just might need a shoulder to cry on to. So sometimes, like I like to say, don't hear to or don't listen to respond. Listen to understand. Right? And that's a subtle difference, but that's a power of emotional intelligence. So I would rate emotional intelligence pretty high up there. And then it's like soft skills, social skills, whatever you call it, like how good you can articulate yourself, how good is your communication. But all those things are easier to improve versus everything else. Like you can enroll yourself in a communications course, and 4 weeks later you can come back with a significant improvement. But developing emotional intelligence takes years.
Yeah. On that note, I'd like to share an instance too. So, last few weeks have been pretty hard on me with work. So, I was consumed and I had a lot of problems occurring during my work. And there were blockers which we did not expect that came up unexpectedly, which was holding our launch. So, I have a mentor called, he's Gaurav. His name is Gaurav at Amazon. So, we usually have a bi-weekly one-on-one. So I just went in that one-on-one and I just started explaining my problems to him and what blockers I'm facing. Now, he just patiently listened to me. He did not say a word, he did not provide me any solutions. But while I was describing problems to him, that helped me get solutions to some of the problems at that moment itself. So I think he was very patient with me. And I think I got, after I finished venting about my problems, he gave me his view. So he is not in my team. He does not belong in my org also. So that was a third eye view that I got from his end. And that also helped me a lot. So I think I agree with you that that is one of the very important traits to have in a person. So uh, let's get to the topic of upscaling or downselling yourself. So a lot of times you go to an interview, you almost kill the interview, but you end up downselling yourself in that interview, and you believe that you are paid X amount, but you think that you could have got 10 or 20% more in that interview. Or sometimes you know that this position is well around your resume, around your skills. You can kill this interview, but sometimes you end up missing that interview. So how to upsell yourself and not downsell yourself in an interview?
Yeah. I think this is an interesting question in many different ways. I think a lot of times we are very hard on ourselves when we appear for an interview, right? And I don't understand why, right? And I'll give you examples. Like for when you are giving an interview, what do you have to lose? Like if you're going for an interview, it can only result in two outcomes. You either get the job or you don't get the job. If you get the job, great, it's a positive outcome. And if you don't get a job, it's a neutral outcome. You still have the job that you are on. Now, I agree there are exceptions if you lost your job or if you're the first job that you're looking for, sure. But being hard on yourself doesn't yield anything. So first of all, do not, and when we are hard on ourselves, we end up undermining ourselves and downselling ourselves. So that's the first part. The other part is stop looking at interviews as, oh, somebody's going to grill me. Start looking at interviews as, this is your opportunity. This is your sales pitch. You can go and talk about how awesome you are, right? You're not responding to, oh, somebody's going to ask me a question. I'm going to respond to those questions. You are essentially sharing what you are good at, right? I'll take perfect example of Amazon's leadership principles, right? Tell me about a time X, right? When you failed, when you did something awesome, whatever that is. That's the question. Nobody has forced you in a specific corner that you need to answer it this way. You pick up how you want to respond. You pick up the best project that you think, right? So figuring out what to showcase when and how you showcase is important. Definitely there is an aspect of practice, is important, right? Last but not the least is, you talked about the upselling part. It's more than upselling. It is convincing the interviewers or the hiring manager that you are the best person for this job. And how do you do that? You do that by doing your research about the biggest problem that that company, that team, that person has. And then showcasing through your interview that you are the best person to help solve that problem for them. I think that's the most important part. There's nothing else.
Yeah. Have you ever like downsold yourself in an interview? Any instances?
Oh, many times. Many times. I've made my share of mistakes, and I'm not saying that I do a perfect job of upselling myself, but to give you an example, like one of my actually, right after I came back into corporate after selling my company, I also moved back to India to be closer to my family. And that time, I wanted to start a business in India, but Indian market, as we all know, is very different. So what I wanted to start, I couldn't do. I just couldn't do because of regulations, because of lack of ethics and policies around or regulations around how sellers sell stuff and whatnot. I'll not go into though. That's a story for another day. But after trying for a couple of months, I was clear that this is not going to pan out. I need to find work. Right. So I started looking for a job. PayPal came first, and I picked up that job. Not saying PayPal was bad, but that was my first offer. It was in Chennai. I'm from northern part of India, right? So I should have waited to find something in the Delhi NCR region, because what happened as an end result is when we moved to Chennai, in about a year, we were like, we can't stay here because we don't understand the language. We feel more alienated in our own country, right? So, and we are not close to our parents, the prime reason why we came back to India and we came back to the US, right? So I would say I didn't undersell myself in terms I could have made a little bit more money and that kind of stuff. Like that's part, but I jumped on the first thing that came along the way um, as part of a desperation,
Right.
which I shouldn't have done.
Yeah, I think that is also kind of downselling yourself when you know you can do
Yes,
better. Yes.
exactly, exactly.
So, last question on this: does resumes matter at this time?
Um, yes and no.
Okay.
Why I say yes and no is, if you are going in through a referral, let's say you come to a company where you have a friend or your previous manager who knows you, then you don't need to send a resume. Like they can just, it might be just a formality to put into the system when the formal application goes in. So on that part, I say it's no. But on the places where you don't have a referral, resume is your marketing brochure. Remember, I talked about in interviews your sales
Right.
pitch. What comes before a sales pitch is a brochure. So resume is your marketing brochure. If that doesn't leave a good impression, resume is tossed out. Move on to the next candidate. And a recruiter typically has about 7 seconds. There's a research around it, right? Like they have about 7 seconds to actually make a yay or a nay decision on a resume, right? And it may not be all about how good or bad you are. Essentially, they are in a recruiter's mind. They have a set of criteria that they're looking for. How quickly can they find that criteria? How much overlap they can find in the criteria they have in the resume that your resume can specify. That's the most important part. And if your resume is either too long or too wordy or too hard to read or missing the key things, it's going through out the window. Right. So from that perspective, it is very important.
I've heard my friends say that I apply for 100 jobs, and in it's very difficult to. So the general notion is it is getting difficult to find a job at this moment of time in our industry. So if they apply for 100 jobs, I think they get a response that we received your resume and we will be looking at your resume from around 40 to 50 companies. And out of that, maybe a company or two respond them for the next process, next steps. So I think something about the resume might be wrong, that it is not getting captured either by a recruiter or either by. I've heard that there are some automated machines that filter out resumes now for companies. So how would you like if I have to ask on behalf of my friends or from myself too, that how would you improve that? How would you create a resume in such a way that you get better responses from companies, your resume is getting looked at? So what are the some things that might get into your resume?
Sure. I think there are a couple of things going on here. Like first one is you're right in saying there are a lot of people looking for the same job. So if you look at even through LinkedIn, you'll see every job has a lot more number of applies than they previous used to have, right? So that's the first part. Which means the population that the recruiters or the hiring manager has to review is very large.
Right.
Now, if you or your resume, in this case, your resume or your application is not standing out, what are the odds? Right. So essentially, what you have to do is you have to stand out of that crowd. Right. It's the same thing. Like you can go back to India and look at the how the cricket selections happen in Ranji Trophy and the state thing and even the college
Yeah.
cricket. Is somebody needs to spot you out. Right. Somebody need like you need to be spotted, and for that to be spotted, you need to do something different. So there are a few things that you could do different is, and that is there's nothing to do with make your resume pretty. I know there are a lot of tools out there which makes your resume pretty.
Ad
I
color.
personally feel they're a waste of money. Don't spend, yeah, don't spend any money on that. They take resume, convert it to columns, three columns. They make it harder to parse. Right? Humans don't read things like up and down. They go from left to right and then go down. Right? And there's a research around this where we say human eye usually follows an pattern when looking at a page. So when you start on the top of the page, you look at from top to left, left to right, and then as you keep coming down, the how far along you go in on the right side keeps reducing. Right at the top of the page, you'll go all the way to the right. At the bottom of the page, you'll probably not even go there. So put the most important things at the top, right? Work in that order. Write a nice cover letter, not nice in the sense that you are trying to please the hiring manager again. Nice as in how can you make them feel that you are the right person to solve the problem that they have, right? Nobody wants to hire a person on the team just because, right? Everybody has a set of problems that they want solved, and for that they need one or more people. And all a hiring manager needs to see is, can I find a right person who I can hand this problem to and go solve my next problem. Right. So if you can make them feel confident about that part, you're okay.
Yeah. Just last question on hiring. So, have you ever hired a wrong person, and how did you mitigate that issue? Has that ever happened?
Many times, many times. Right. I would not
No,
name
no, we
names.
don't need names.
I wouldn't go into the
Yeah,
details, but I have made my share of mistakes. Again, the most important part as a leader here is everybody will make mistakes. That's fine. You acknowledge the mistake, you own the mistake, and then you take corrective measures to rectify that, right? So, when you are hiring massively, you will end up hiring few people that you shouldn't have hired because you were desperate and you needed somebody so you could focus on other things, like I was saying before. So mistakes will happen, right? And sometimes it's hard to see a person's true behavior in a 45-minute to an hour
right.
interview. Right? That's the reason we have multiple interviews. That if one person didn't catch a red flag, maybe others did. But things will fall through the cracks. It will happen. But the most important part is acknowledging that, owning that mistake, and fixing it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move to our next segment, leadership, but we'll start gradually on that. So my first question will
Sure.
be, do you know what imposter syndrome is? And have you ever experienced, do you still experience that imposter syndrome at your level?
Uh,
Because I think that is very common.
Time
Yeah,
to time.
that is very common in our
Time to
industry,
time.
and especially
Yeah, it's very
in
common.
big companies like FANG. I read a lot about imposter syndrome. So can you explain what that is and how has your experience been?
Yes, I think the imposters, at least as I understand, imposter syndrome is when you feel like I don't belong here, I didn't deserve this. Will I even like? Can I even do this? Right? And a lot of the times this come because we look at somebody else and like, oh my God, this person is so awesome. I can never be like this person. Right? You're making two mistakes there. Right? First, you're doing a comparison. And any comparison that is not with your own self often doesn't lead any good results. Right? Second is you are selling yourself short. You are doubting yourself. And like one of my early mentors told me that if you ever want to find your biggest blocker, just go and look at the mirror. Right? The simple thing is so profound that your biggest blocker is you, nobody else. It's just you. If you believe that you can do it, you can do it. Right? Yes, you might not succeed in the first try, but that's okay. That's life, such as life. Like, we didn't come to this earth knowing everything. We learned everything that we learned after coming here. Right? So that's one part. And to my earlier thing, about don't compare yourself with anybody else. The most important thing is, like, for example, you don't want to become next Elon Musk. You want to become Dhruvam, the best version of Dhruvam, right? So the day we start realizing this, the imposter syndrome will start going down. But I know I have to acknowledge I'm guilty as charged. I used to feel that. I sometimes still feel it. There are situations where you are thrown in and you're like, oh my God, what will I do? Right? For example, going to a large public meetings still gives me chills.
Right.
Like trying to speak in front of hundreds of people still gives me chills. Like, will I succeed? Am I a good storyteller? I don't know. But I won't do any better unless I
Right.
try.
That is correct. So I think I know as a leader, it is very difficult to catch that this particular person is feeling an imposter syndrome in my team. But how, as a leader, can you prevent that from happening? in your team?
I think the most important thing for that is creating a psychological safe environment, right? What I mean by that is your team should feel safe when it comes to making
Right.
mistakes. A lot of the times we try not to, in fear of making a mistake, we resort to not trying it. And the base underlying reason for that is we fear a retaliation if we make a
Right.
mistake, right? So, creating a psychologically safe environment is the first foundation principle. Second is creating a sense of trust that, when the team feels that anybody on the team, when they start feeling that if I make a mistake, the team, my manager, they've got my back, that goes a long way, goes a really long way, right? Versus, oh my God, if everybody around me is trying to get me, I'll be a defensive self of myself. I will try to, make sure I only take actions or decisions which I'm super, super sure about. Otherwise, I will not take a decision because I know if I make a mistake, people will
Right.
get me.
Question. So, uh, I know that in our team, in our previous team, so my managers also looked up to you as a leader, and when asked questions, they used to give examples about you. So I think something you did was right as a leader. And can you share that with us? Like, what are some things that you feel you did right as a leader, and what are some important must-haves to be a leader? So you can consider me as I want to be an aspiring leader going forward. What would you advise me?
Um, I think let me pose the question back to you. What do you think a leader is?
I think, as we discussed, a leader is someone who can create safe environment to make mistakes for us, right? And every day,
Yeah.
not every day, but I think eventually make us better than what we were in the past. So if I met you today, and if I look back 6 months from now, what would I be? Would I be a better person under you? Would I be at a higher position or at a higher skill set? That might be a better leader for me.
Let me add a little bit of clarification to that. A leader doesn't make you better.
Okay.
They are enablers. You are the one who makes
Okay.
you better. Right? I cannot make you better in any way. Right? I can tell you a lot of things. I can share my experience, but it's up to you to take those learnings, find how to apply them to the use case that you have in front of you, or completely discard those
Right.
things. So I cannot, as a leader, I cannot make you better. I can enable you to
I
become
think
better.
a leader can,
Right? So that's a
yeah,
subtle
I think a
difference.
leader can create opportunities for you so that you can grow. You can take grab those fruits and grow eventually.
Sure.
Yeah.
Again, enabler. A opportunity can be presented to you, but if you choose not to take it,
Right. Yeah.
right? So not much can be. So again, it's not a major difference, but I feel it's a subtle difference. I like to tell everybody, and I think I've told you when as well when we used to have our
Yeah.
regular one-on-ones. It's your career. It's nobody else's career, right? If you are not on the driving seat, if you don't know where you want to go, if you don't know what are your growth areas, you cannot succeed. Everybody else can give you feedback, they can help you make those decisions, but they can't make decisions
Right.
for you. Right. So now coming back to your question about how to become a better leader, I think that I will go back to emotional intelligence, right? I think that's a secret superpower, right? Invest time in building emotional intelligence, invest time in empathy, right? And last but not the least, I think I also wrote a post about this very
Right.
recently. 85% of your career success depends on only one thing. And I can almost guarantee you a lot of people will think it's like it's either your how good you are technically or whatnot. No, it's none of that. It's communication. Right? 85% of success of your career success depends on communication. Now let this, sit down with you for a minute and think about it. Everything else is 15%. Now, communication is a broad term. A lot of emotional intelligence, empathy kind of fall in that bucket because how you deal with people, how you respond to things, what you say to people, all falls in communication. Rest everything is still 15%. Right? So focus on that, focus on making others better. That's the secret recipe.
So you mentioned about emotional intelligence. So for someone like me, I'd say I'd rate my emotional intelligence about 5% in myself. How do you develop emotional intelligence in yourself? How do you build that? Because it does not come naturally to you. You eventually build it either with experience or how does it go?
I think it again, it's yes, it's art, but there's some science to it too, right? So the few ways you can do is by reading about it, right? And then most important thing is pause before you speak. Right? As they say, feel first, act later. Usually, what we do is we hear something and our instinct is, I need to respond. No, I don't need to respond. Let me hear that. Let me understand that. Let me try to put myself in other person's shoes. Like, what are they going through? If you don't know, ask open-ended questions. Like, I'll give a simple, scenario. Let's say you are a engineering manager or STM at Amazon, and one of your engineers is struggling to meet their commitments or deliverables. How would you approach that?
Right.
Right. A lot of people approach that with, "Hey X, you had these three deliverables. They all have failed. This is not acceptable. Make sure it doesn't happen again." If you change the narrative slightly and say, "Hey, I see, you're struggling with this. What's going on? Is there anything I can help you with?" Now, the two things happen. One, you are opening yourself to tell me more what's going on. Second, the other person feels that you care and they are more open to share them. And then they might tell you that, oh, there's something going on in my personal life. They might be going through a divorce. They might have somebody sick in the family, or they might have health issues themselves. Like, God knows, life happens. If nothing is wrong in your life today, doesn't mean nothing is wrong in the person you're talking to's life today. Right? And we can't find out magically. Only way for us to is ask open-ended questions. And one thing you can do is be vulnerable yourself. Right? When you talk about your weaknesses, the other person feels more, kind of obliged that, oh, you shared with me, let me share something with you too. Right? So I think that's what at least has worked
I
for
think
me.
you have a brilliant article on emotional intelligence. I'll make sure that I'll share that with the audience in the description. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
uh, we talked about emotional intelligence, but what else makes a better leader?
Um, the other thing is, okay, let's backtrack a little bit, right? Our tech industry has you know has a foundation which I think is somewhat distorted. And why I say that is usually who gets promoted to a leadership position, and for now we'll just use leadership is equal
Right.
to management, right? I know there are a lot of differences, but we
Yeah.
can talk about it at a different time. Somebody who's a really good engineer often gets promoted to become a manager. Now, to become an engineer, you went through a full college to understand the skills required, right? They might not have taught you how to clear interviews, but they taught you the basics of programming, data structures, operating systems, computer-based fundamentals, and everything. And on top of it, language to communicate. But when you go from being an engineer to a manager, the skills required are completely different, and there is no school for
Right.
that. Right? So, because of that, what happens is when you take on a new role, a lot of times people feel, oh, if I give everything to my team, what would I do? Like, I feel like I'm
Right.
losing control, right? And that's where imposter syndrome comes too. Or if I'm going to delegate everything, what am I doing? I'm just doing one-on-ones, right? So that mindset is a foundational flaw in our industry, which I think needs to be addressed. So to come back to what other things that we need in addition to emotional intelligence is how to delegate effectively. How do you create a culture of trust, right? And how do you establish a strong vision, right? So if I were to kind of put it in sort of a framework, I would say as a leader, you start with a vision. You define what is our end goal? Where are we going? You start with a vision, use empathy to build a team because empathy usually leads to a culture of trust. When there is trust, along with a smooth communication, the team is usually high performing. And then you follow through to execution, where execution gets you results delivered.
Right.
Right? So that's how I would structure. Each one of these things will have their own required skills, but often emotional intelligence, communication, and delegation. Like there is no dearth of of things of articles written about this. But I cannot emphasize enough how many people struggle with delegation. Right till now, I all my direct reports usually they have heard me talk about a old Harvard Business Review article called as "Who's Got the Monkey."
Right.
Right? If you're interested, go read that. That essentially talks about how managers, if they don't delegate effectively, can become bottleneck very, very quickly. Okay, so I highly recommend reading that article.
You talked about delegation and the struggles with it. Now, I want to share an instance. So, during one of our one-on-ones, you showed me your calendar, and out of 8 hours, I think you had 6 hours just meetings. And I'm sure you don't just attend meetings, you have your own work and your own problems to solve at your role, right? So, uh, how do you manage to work, like address your problems at the same time attend those meetings during your work day? Uh, I think the only way you might have gotten your work done might be through delegation. But as you're saying, delegate effectively. So there might be some work that you might be doing personally. And I saw your calendar and there was a meeting for 30 minutes. There was a 15-minute empty time. And then there was a meeting for an hour. So I think that breaks the link also if you are doing some work. So how do you effectively delegate?
Um, I think this is the reason why effective delegation becomes important. Right? So this is the primary driver. If I had 8 hours of block to do the work, I would do the work, right? But I know I don't have 8 hours at a go. So and then there are also other things, to think about. You have a list of things that you want to do. You might not be the right fit to do everything, right? Not that you're not capable, but something that might take you, let's say, 3 hours to do it. If I were to give to, let's say, you, like when you were on my team, if I were to give that piece of code and a problem to write for you, you probably might turn it out in 20 minutes because you write code day in, day out. Wrote the code last probably
Yeah,
15 years ago
makes sense.
in a commercial setting, right? So not that I can't do it, I probably still can do it, but I might will take
Right.
very, very long time. So realizing who's the best fit to do that thing, delegating that, Second is, what is the urgency of that? Keeping that in mind. Um, and then there is aspect of, I would say confidentiality. There are certain things which I can't delegate, that I have to do myself. For those, I'll have to find time. So be it, I'll move my meetings around, find 1-2 hours blocks. Sometimes I'll block my calendar. And a lot of the times, the meetings that we have on our calendar are actually to solve
Correct.
problems. They are not meetings we go and go discuss, brainstorm something and come back. Usually we are, there's a lot of times we are debating about like, how should we solve this problem? Or, okay, in Amazon's context, we are reading a document to make a decision. So goal in that meeting is to make a decision, and that was the problem we were trying to solve. So I think it's a combination of all of those things.
And I think one of the important traits of a leader is to recognize which of your team members are high performing, which of your team members are not that high performing. So some advice or some traits from that on that from you.
I'll go back to the advice my first manager gave me. If you are a manager, the person who's making your life easier
Right.
is the best performer,
That's correct.
right? And again, I'll clarify again. It's not about pleasing your manager. It's about giving time back to your manager so they can focus on solving bigger problems, and that's the only way to grow.
So on that, so you do a lot of things in your team. There are a lot of tasks which are visible to the team. But under the curtain, you do a lot of things which are not visible, but are in general making lives easier for your team members or your manager. But you cannot see them. Whether you just unblocked a pipeline, invested 15 to 30 minutes in your day and just did that, but that's not visible to the manager. But that was a very effective change, a small change, but very effective. So how do you, or you help the team member like unblock him? Now, I don't think that you might go to your manager and say, "Hey, I unblocked this teammate." But how do you get noticed in your team that you are doing work, you are making your manager's lives easy? And as a manager, yeah,
I think you
yeah,
go ahead,
and as a
finish
manager,
your
how
thought.
can you like bring that up?
Yeah, I think you're raising an important point
Right,
about visibility, right? So you're right that you might be doing a lot of good work in the team, but if it's not visible, nobody knows about it, right? It's the same thing. You build a new product, you start a new business, but if you don't tell anybody about that business, will you ever have customers? Nobody will buy it because nobody knows about it. So it's this exact same thing. Only thing is here the product is you and the value you are bringing to the table. Now, yes, when it comes to, if I go out and tell, hey, this is what I did, people will feel like, oh, you are boasting and you are just, kind of showcasing your stuff, and then people will name different kind of names to you. But there are ways to do. So there's a method to this madness, right? What I call it as humble bragging,
right,
right? The idea here is, instead of going and saying, I helped this person in solving this blah problem, what if in the next meeting you say, hey, let us walk through a simple thing or simple improvement that we made in our pipeline that will help all of us. Now you suddenly shifted from I did something great to look at this awesome thing that is going to help us, right? So that's one thing. That's how you showcase your improvements. And there are these newsletters that typically every company has, or product, update, emails, meetings, where you should call
to
out
add to
these
you the
wins.
communication point,
The other
the
aspect is,
85% communication thing that you said.
yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. The other part is, this is about showcasing your work. What about showcasing yourself, right? People might see, oh, there is somebody who writes great code and has solved all these problems for us. Our pipelines are 25% better now, failure rate is down 50%, and blah, 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 like all those kind of things. But how do people
Right.
know who's Dhruvam? For that, you need to put yourself out there. Like, go out of your comfort zone, do things that are visible to the company. Go participate in company events and other things. Like, I'll tell you one thing that I did after I came to Indeed in my first couple of months was organize a company-wide conference on on recommendations. So there are multiple teams who do recommendations, and there are other people who want to do recommendations, but they don't know how. So we organized this large conference with over 2,000 people joining across the world. I organized that. What the best thing I got of that was, in order to organize this, I got to meet about 100 people in my first 30 days. Right? Otherwise, I would have never
Exactly.
reached out to these people. Right? So participating in those kind of things, organizing those kind of things, networking proactively, like that's super important. Like, I will also tie it back to, we talked about interviewing, getting your next job and whatnot. Network is a key factor. And there's a very useful book. The book is called as Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Right? Essentially what it's saying is, don't start building a network when you really need help from that network. Build the network first, so when you need it, the network is there. Same way, like, you would not start digging a well when you get thirsty and you need water. You will have a well before, so when you're thirsty, you can just take water out of the well. And so it's a very interesting book, but the key idea is network proactively, not reactively.
I think that's a great analogy to end our leadership topic. So, just the last topic of this podcast, what do you think? Where is our industry heading? Whether it be AI, whether it be hiring, where is our industry heading next? What do you predict about it?
Oh, tough question. I think our industry is changing at a pace
Right.
that we have never seen before. Right? Look back 20 years, it feels like we were still stuck in the Stone Age. And imagine, who thought we'll
Yeah.
have a computer in our pockets? Like, never thought. So on that front, I believe a lot of things will change in next 10 years. But one thing I'm super kind of intrigued by is definitely LLMs, the large language models. Um, I would say thank you to ChatGPT, because now everybody knows about it. Like, LLMs are not a new thing.
Yeah.
LLMs have existed for many years. But thanks to ChatGPT, everybody knows about it now. But I think this technology kind of opens up many, many different doors in many, many unique ways. Like, for an example, recommendations, or the machine learning, AI has been around for God knows how long. Right? We interact with every day. Right? You go to your Instagram feed, you go to your LinkedIn feed. It's all AI behind the scenes, figuring out what should they show you, what should they not show you, based on your interest, based on your behavior and whatnot. But all that said, that usage of AI was sort of kind of exclusively for data scientists, machine learning engineers, and whatnot, right? What Chat GPT kind of thing has opened up is, they brought a interface in front of the average Joe user, and they can interact with this AI and do things which were never
Right.
heard of before. So while I'm not scared that this
Humans.
thing will replace any of our jobs, so I'm not afraid of that. Um, I believe even if it displaces some jobs, it will create a lot more, just like industrial revolution that happened so long ago. So I'm not, but this is like, I'm not scared, but I am excited,
Yeah.
but I'm anxious as well on this on the side. So
What
that's
is
how I would say.
so just we want to know the public domain knowledge. What is Indeed doing in AI at the moment? What steps is it taking?
Um, I think Indeed, like any other company,
Right.
we have AI everywhere, right? You go to Indeed.com, when you create an account, the jobs that you see, the recommendations that you get in emails, they're all AI powered. Right? I will refrain
Yeah.
from going into specifically what sort of machine learning happens behind the scenes or what we are thinking of doing. So that's not a public domain knowledge. But AI is practically everywhere. And I think almost every website, every app, AI has
Right.
AI
So I think
in
that will
there.
help the job appliers more now going forward with AI.
That's the hope. So the idea is, like, so again, AI has been there, right? So the recommendation, like in Indeed, we recommend jobs to job seekers and we recommend candidates to the employers, right? So we've been doing that for not new, it's not a new thing. We've been doing that for many years, right? It is no different than you going to Netflix and you watch a movie and based on that you start
Watch
seeing, okay,
this.
because you watched this or you watched Mission Impossible, so here
Right.
are the other movies like Mission Impossible. And it's no different than that. And same thing, you go to Amazon, you look at something, you see things like customers who bought this camera, they also bought this SD card and this battery pack and this tripod, right? And people, who saw this camera from Canon, they also saw these other cameras from Canon and Nikon, right? So there's all AI recommendations everywhere that we
All
touch.
right. So thank you so much for answering my questions very patiently and very in depth. And I don't know, but this was a very knowledge-packed
Thank you,
first
Dhuvam.
podcast for me. So, uh, yeah, I hope our readers also
Thank
find
you.
this very helpful. And thank you so much for joining this podcast. And it was a very delightful talk with you.